Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Stormkeep. My name is Paul, and today with me, I've got.
Hey guys, it's Morgan.
Hey y'all, it's David.
And today we're going to be doing an update to our Stormcast Eternals tier list. We didn't think we'd be doing one so soon after doing the Battletome review, but Games Workshop has been very aggressive in making changes to 4th edition for the sake of balance, both internal and external balance, not just nerfs. You would expect new Battletome comes out, gotta nerf the top performers, but no, they've also buffed some of the stuff that was on the fringe case of usability. So this has been a very, very exciting update. All right, so let's start talking about what actually changed in the Battlescroll. Now, we did a whole live stream presentation about this where we went into further detail, but just so that everybody's on the same page, I wanted to give you guys the Cole's Notes version here, and especially what's relevant to Stormcast. So there's been a number of rule changes. First off, Honor Guard was completely redesigned. It's our only seasonal rule, and they decided to massively tinker with it, which I'm okay with because it wasn't a very interesting rule, and the way it shook out, everybody was just going for 2-drops, and there was never a reason not to go for 2-drops. And now it seems like there's some more variety. There's actually a benefit to having more regiments than your opponent, so there's a bit of a mini game going on there. There's 2 brand new abilities: Field Sergeant, which increases the movement of infantry units, and Prize Beast, which gives a unit in the general's regiment, which is a monster, +1 hit in combat, including companion weapons all the time. So it's like all-out attack permanently. It's very, very good for Stormcast because we have a very strong monster keyword unit that we can give it to.
Well, it's non-hero monster, so, can't be like a Star Drake or anything. But
it can be a hero, but it can't be unique.
Oh, is it non-unique hero?
You can give it to a Rune Sun on Magmadroth.
Oh, okay. It cannot be leading the regiment.
Correct. Correct. It can't be leading the regiment, and it can't be unique. Those are the restrictions. Mm-hmm. There was another rule change where Covering Fire now cannot be used if you used a run keyword ability. And the most common one that people use in the opponent's turn would be Redeploy. So most units in the game can no longer use Redeploy and then Covering Fire. This really does simplify a lot of decision making. Let's say during your turn, there's a lot of situations where your opponent is able to move one model, slightly closer to a different unit with Redeploy, and then that becomes the closest target, so they're able to shoot at it. Most units just can't do this anymore. It does still work if you have a run and shoot ability, such as the Vanguard Chamber. It has the same, Covering Fire now has the same wording as regular shoot, so abilities that work on regular shoot also work on Covering Fire. And finally, the last big rule change, game-wide rule change, not just army-specific change. If you take a double turn, your opponent gains underdog for the rest of the battle, or until they take a double turn. So it doesn't matter how many points behind you end up. If you took a double turn, your opponent gets the underdog advantage for the whole game. Now, this really didn't seem like a big deal at first, but there's a lot of battle plans where being the underdog every single turn is quite silly. You get things like +1 hit if you charged on some battle plans, or you get to just burn an objective in your turn every turn for the rest of the game. It makes it very, very strange to start scoring more objectives. For example, in Jaws of Gallet, if you're the underdog, you get to burn an objective at the end of each of your turns, which is pretty crazy because you determine which objective gets burned, and then it becomes very easy to score more objectives because you just burn one of your opponents. Now, if you're behind by 6 or more victory points, then there's no penalties for taking a double turn. The opponent doesn't gain underdog, you can score a battle tactic, and so on. And of course, there's been a host of changes to other armies. Points, rules, lots of stuff has changed in this Battlescroll. It was, I want to say it was the most change I've ever seen in a winter Battlescroll. Like outside of a summer handbook release, this has been the most change we've seen in this kind of release.
It's also a really big shakeup in terms of army building and the double turn meta, as I like to call them, because a lot of times, we saw this in 3.02, it's like list building was directly centered around taking a double and winning the game. So I'm nice to see that they're including some options for people who get doubled.
I've never enjoyed the list building that funnels you into wanting to go second at the top of round 1. So you build your list in such a way that you have as few drops as possible because you want to go second, because you want to be able to win a double turn. I never enjoyed that mechanic. I think they should just get rid of that wholesale. There's lots of ways to do it, but it's one of the worst things about competitive play is everything kind of just leads down that road. It's really annoying.
Mm-hmm. And it ends a lot of games is my problem. It's You go through all this effort of painting your models up, going to a table. You're expecting to spend at least a couple hours having a good time. A game can be over by like a double turn.
Yeah,
especially if the list is built around taking advantage of it.
It feels bad to do it to people as well, right? It's not just feeling bad on the receiving end of it, but if you're building a list just to do that to people, it's like, I don't know. It's just not fun. Yeah. I get that it's tactical. There's counterplay. It's something to do in list building, because without it, list building would just be a lot less interesting. But I think we can find more interesting mechanics than this. Stormcast in particular have received a number of changes, some rule changes. For example, Ionis now has the Ruination Chamber keyword. He doesn't have the Ruination Chamber ability, which allows you to ignore things such as covering fire or any non-core ability. There's also new exemplars, which are like list building tools. So these heroes can be placed inside regiments of heroes that can bring these exemplars, such as Bastion, Krondys, Lord Celestant. All of these can bring these smaller heroes. They've basically recreated sub-commanders from 3rd edition, but okay. Gardas, Gavriel, the Lord Imperatant, the Lord Terminos, the Knight Judicator, and the Knight Zephyros can all be brought as these mini heroes now, which is pretty cool. I think of these, the ones that really matter are, I would say, Gardas, Gavriel, Terminos, and Judicator. I don't see a lot of use for a Zephyros as an exemplar, and the Lord Imperatant just seems unusably bad right now.
No, yeah, not while Gavriel exists. I don't think you'll ever see the Lord Imperatant.
Yeah, maybe once the summer rotation happens and Gavriel moves to Legends, we might see the Imperatant, but honestly...
Even then, it's a pretty hard sell. Yeah, unless he drops down to like 100. He would have to be 100 points. And I'll actually push for that if I ever meet any of the game designers at LVO.
He's got to be 100, and like Annihilator's got to be like 190. Like the whole thing needs to come down a lot to make it worthwhile.
I didn't realize this before, but one of the reasons Gavriel actually takes precedent, and now that he's become I think he's an exemplar now. One of the reasons he's really good is because he actually gives you that 8 plus charge, unmodified 8, pretty easily on Annihilators of Grand Hammers.
Yeah.
You can pretty neatly guarantee that strike last.
Stormcast also received a number of point changes. Some nerfs, right? Long Strikes went up 20 points. Both kinds of Vanguard Paladars went up 20 points. And Gryph-hounds went up 10 points. Not sure who was asking for Gryph-hounds to get nerfed, but there it is, I guess. In terms of buffs, we got a lot. A lot of Stormcast units went down. Of course, I'm going to say it's not enough, right? They could have gone further, but
always
they can always go further. When you got 76 War Scrolls and about half of them are overcosted, they can always go further. Knight Judicator went down 20 and became a exemplar, so that actually makes him playable now, which is cool. It's an interesting direction to move the army in, and I'm excited to see what they do with it in the summer. Veritant went down 10 points. Castigators went down 20, which is really significant for a 130-point shooting unit. That's competing with like 3 other shooting units. To go down that much is really big. Same with Concussors and Desolators. Going down 20 each is huge. Liberators went down 10 and became extremely efficient. Questers were already one of our efficient units, and they've just got better. And Stormdrakes were also doing well. There were some 5.0 lists with them previously to this Battlescroll, and now they're even better. And then I've got a category here, not enough. There was a number of other point changes, and God bless them for trying, but I don't think this is going to be enough to make these units viable, or at least any better than they were. I think they're exactly as good, or maybe a little worse than they were. So Fulminators, Tempestors both went down 10, but with the huge cut cast to Concussors, Fulminators just look much worse now. Concussors being significantly cheaper is not good for Fulminators. Retributors went down 10 points to 170, and that makes a reinforced unit only 340, which is starting to get interesting. The problem is the package required to get them anywhere is still so expensive. You want like Gavriel, Gardas, Lord Imperatant. It's a lot of drops. It's a lot of opportunity cost. It just ends up not being worth it for something that can still fail at the end of the day, right? There's no guarantee on deep strike charging. And without the deep strike charging, I don't think they get anywhere.
I don't know about that. I think the intention is you could run them as like an anvil or like a fast-moving hammer. Like instead of Gardas and Gavriel, you could run a Lord Celestin with Quicksilver Drought and Gavriel. You can use them as like an anchor point and then force your opponent into making bad decisions and then quickly be offensive with Gavriel if you really wanted to.
Yeah, I've tried building it out in different ways, and I can't find a list that feels good. Because Retributors come in a squad of 10, there's no perfect formation that you can fit all of them wholly within 2.5 of the Lord Celestant. So the Quicksilver Draft combo it can be countered by fast or flying units, and right now the metagame is full of those, with Nighthaunt being able to just take exactly the charge they want when they want, or just other Stormcast armies. Vanguard Paladors are so fast, Prosecutors are flying and fast. There's no guarantees that you're going to get the combo off, and when you don't get the combo off, you lose the game, because you've invested so much in making it work, and it just doesn't go off. The Chariot went down 10 points. I think the Chariot needs to keep going down. I think it needs to be 120 points. It needs to be cheaper than Vigilors, because with its War Scroll, the way it's worded, the damage numbers, it's just all very low. It's comparable to a unit of 5 Liberators, but obviously it's faster, and that's the only thing it has going for it. So it needs to be similar cost to a squad of Liberators. Not the same cost, but a little bit more than them. And Stormstrike Paladors went down 20 points. We called for this in the Battletome review, that 210 was really way too much. They've gone down a lot. That's a lot more than brand new models usually go down after the first balance update after a Battletome. That's pretty significant. But I don't know if it's enough to really do anything. And, we can talk about that more when we talk about the rest of the cavalry. And then for heroes, the Azuros went down 30. The Azuros is also an exemplar, but not really worth mentioning because his effect is just not very good. Quester went down 20. He's still not good. Aquilar went down 20, and now this is kind of exciting because that's the point value we thought he'd be right at, 160. And when summer comes around, we're going to be very glad that he's at 160. But right now, totally meaningless. Both the Vigilant on Morgriff and Aridin went down 40, but they're still just bad. I think they need to be another 40 down each, and then maybe they'll see play. Andrasta went down 10, but Andrasta isn't really necessary right now. There might be more monsters in the meta with Prize Beast, but we just have such good tools for dealing with monsters already. I don't think we need Andrasta. And Celestant Prime is still there. It's still the same cost, so yeah. Tornus went down 30, and Tornus is also just bad. He needs to keep going down. And same with Vandus. Unfortunately, control is just not very good. So without further ado, here is our tier list for January. The nerf to long strikes and Vanguard Paladors has knocked them out of S tier. And if you are new to our channel, S tier for us means units that are so strong that you have to run them competitively. Your list is basically not viable unless you're using these units. It could even be seen as a problem for internal balance reasons. Like, this unit is so good, it's making other units that are similar just not playable. And I'm happy to say that now, with the changes to those two units, there are no units left in the S tier for Stormcast. It is really good for list building. There's a lot of different pathways that you can choose. Ideally, every unit lands in the A tier. That would be, perfect Battletome is everything lands in A tier. Obviously, that's never going to happen. Units can spill into the B tier. C tier is our cutoff point for competitive play. If it's below C tier, we don't consider it to be viable. D is usually units that are overcosted, and F tier are units that are just flawed, irredeemably bad, and almost no point value would make them work. The only way they become viable is if you make them so cheap that they become something entirely different other than what their War Scroll is. Like, a perfect example of this would be the Gut Rip a Boss from 3rd edition Cruel Boys, where that hero became so cheap he just turned into a 100-point screen that could use Finest Hour. That's the kind of unit F tier units are.
So, starting off A tier, we've got Prosecutors and Vigilors. Both units are excellent. They're both somewhat fragile. 10 wounds and 6 wounds and 10 wounds on a 3-up save. But their tactical flexibility and what they bring to lists is amazing, to the point where there are very few lists that we build, at least for us over here at the Stormkeep, where we do not bring at least one unit of them. And now we're even leading into a reinforced unit of Prosecutors. They're just fast, they shoot, they have a 3d6 charge, they can hit something really hard, and because they're so cheap, a reinforced block is only 280 points. They can trade really well into things that are above their point value. If they die, they die. You can just bring something back with Heaven Sent and then charge that again for 3d6. Vigilors, because Stormcast have always been a very shooting-heavy army. We do heavily sort of spread our damage between the shooting and the combat phase. And giving a +1 to hit to things like Vanguard Paladors with both the handheld crossbows and the Star Strike Javelins, giving +1 to hit to our Raptors, giving +1 to hit, it just gives us so much tactical flexibility other than saving us command points. It even lets us split our shooting hammers up if we want to. If we have 2 into 6 castigators, or if we have something like a Night Judicator or a Raptor. So yes, prosecutors and vigilors definitely A tier. You will see one of each in almost every list, if not at least one of these in every list.
Another good thing about vigilors is, I mean, look at everything else in the A tier. Vigilors combo with every other good unit in our book, right? Prosecutors want to be able to get +1 hit in shooting and in combat. Both kinds of Vanguard Paladors want to get +1 hit in both phases. You've got Castigators, Long Strikes, other shooting hammers like Judicators. All of these units want +1 hit. They don't want to be spending command points on that. You've also got Krondys and Karazai, the 2 big dragons. They're none of their attacks are companions, so they all benefit from this +1 hit from the Vigilors. So Vigilors are just a great combo piece. Now, don't be confused and think that they're like a shooting damage unit. They're there as a screening type unit that also shoots and gives you +1 hit. If you bring a list with multiple units of Vigilors, reinforced units of Vigilors, I think that's a mistake. I think the damage output from these units is not good enough to justify that role. But that's why we've grouped them with the Prosecutors in the infantry section rather than in the shooting section with Castigators and Judicators.
So our next one, as usual, they've been good since the index, is Paladors. Do not get confused with the -1 on the Javelins. They were S tier, and now we consider them A tier. The reason they were S tier at the beginning was because, for some crazy unknown reason, GW decided to knock off -10 on them on the first pass around, which just essentially made Javelins so undercosted, you had to justify a reason like Long Strikes to not bring them. But they're still arguably probably our best unit in the book. A lot of lists, my main list I'm playing right now is actually 2x6 Javelins. So I still feel Paladors in general, you need to have a reason not to bring them unless you have another specific niche. They just do so much for you. Axes are at the same level if you don't want to shoot. Because they take special assignment really well. The -1 wound is really nice in case you get hit back. Like Paul and McGonk said earlier, the Vigilors just combo really, really well with the Javelin Paladors. Being +1 a hit on all 3 phases when they attack is really strong. Dracolines are probably our best defensive brawlers in the book, especially with the Sacrosanct bonus. Just bringing 5 wounds back onto a unit is really, really massive, especially now with Rally not being as it was in 3rd edition. Stormdrake Guard continue to get buffed, -10 the last 2 patches. So, and then they added Prize Beasts in the game, which Stormdrake Guard are allowed to take Prize Beasts right now. I'm not sure how long that will stay, but free all-out attack on Stormdrake Guard is really, really powerful. Not only offensively, but defensively, it opens them up to be all-out defense while still maintaining a +1 a hit.
Yeah, it also helps offset -1 hit effects, which was a pretty big problem for Stormdrake Guard because their mounts will be hitting on 4s. And you don't want to hit on 4s with Stormcast. Even 3s are not ideal. Like, perfect scenario, everything's on 2s and 2s, as accurate as possible, and -1 hit effects really hurt Stormdrake Guard, so it's really nice to be +1 hit all the time. And if you need to, you can stack all-out attack on that, and then still be at +1 overall against a -1 hit.
Next on the list, surprisingly, Castigators. Castigators have jumped up from D tier all the way up to A tier, thanks to the recent points cut. Their 220 points are reinforced 6 block, and the damage that they do is now really good and really efficient, especially in a meta that is now all about these fast-moving cavalry units. Weirdly enough, they are now at the same place as Vanguard Raptors with Long Strike crossbows. They got a +20. The Long Strike's got a +20. And although they're still a great shooting unit, you will definitely see Stormcast players still bringing them. They are not just the auto-take most efficient option over everything else that we have in our roster. Same thing can be said for Judicators. After a bit of testing, and Paul can attest to this, I guess, he's been experimenting with 2 into 10 blocks. 2 10 blocks of Judicators, and the tactical flexibility you get with just like that level of concentrated shooting where you can shoot things out of position, out of combat, free them up for movement or charging or more shooting is really, really great. The fact that they have anti-monster shock bolt bows with D3 plus 3 shots, which means you'll typically get with the prime something like close to like 8 to 9, sometimes 10 shots into monsters with -2 rend is actually also pretty neat. Gives them a bit of flexibility, and just having that density of wounds, like 40 wounds in 2 blocks of 10 Judicators, on 3-up saves is actually really difficult for the enemy to remove. Whereas long strike can just get caught out in like a bad turn and get removed off the board, forcing you to spend a CP to bring them half of them back.
In the past, the health on our shooting units hasn't been very relevant. We've gotten used to playing long strikes with their tiny health pools for many years now, and it was always a matter of just positioning properly, never putting them in danger. But the game has changed to where you can't really do that. You have to open the long strikes up to some kind of damage, either charges from flying units or teleport shooting. There's all kinds of threats, and their health pool is a liability. The same problem exists for castigators. Of course, they are much cheaper, so you can bring 2 squads of them for each squad of long strikes. Bow Judicators having a massive health pool is really, really nice. They rarely get destroyed, and when they do, they're a good target to bring back with Heaven Sent, coming back with 5 models right away. It's. I never thought it would matter, but it does, and it feels really good to have a 20 health shooting block.
To piggyback off that, so I've actually been playing 2x6 Cascaders since their 20-point drop, and I've really, really liked it. If you guys are in our Discord, or if you want to join our Discord, we actually run numbers in one of our sections. Cascaders do significantly more damage than Raptors do for only 40 points more, which is a 10% increase. And even though we're switching a little more towards the infantry meta, I would say, a lot of armies are still utilizing cavalry a ton. Vanguard are still good. Stormcast, our primary hammers are all cavalry. Think of Seraphon or any other army that you play where you always see a lot of cavalry. The Cascaders getting +1 to run against that anti-cav is actually really significant because there's almost no anti-cav in this game, which is why cavalry was so strong at release. So if you have Cascaders, I would recommend testing them until they disappear in June. But they've been really, really good for me.
Mm-hmm. And what's neat about them is that on a double turn, they get super deadly with that 5-up crits and the they can potentially even, they are CP free because they can spend their Griffon to get +1 to hit and +3 on their range. It's a really nice, efficient, self-contained unit. They're super great. It feels super great. And it's the first time in 8 years they've been playable. So
it's been a long time coming, and it won't last long. So use them while you can.
Yeah.
Moving down, we have the Knight Arcanum, Lord Relictor, Estrella, and Crondi. So the Knight Arcanum, kind of with Estrella, right? Spells, manifestations are still really strong. As seen in this last Battlescroll, manifestations are just here to stay. They're not going away. I'm not sure if they're going to nerf them come summer, but the Knight Arcanum really, really likes to double down on casting all those manifestations. Morbid's still really good. We have been playing a lot more Forbidden Power. If you haven't played Forbidden Power, I would recommend it. Movement wins games, and a Knight Arcanum countercasting a bridge or shards can actually be really, really game-changing. I've done it a couple of times with Estrella, but if instead it was a Knight Arcanum for that +1, it would go off even more. So Arcanum is almost sneaking into S tier, only because manifestations are still just really gross right now. Lord Relictor, after the last balance update, 2s no longer fail. You have to roll an unmodified one to counter translocate or anything you want to do. So I've been using counter translocate more and more in my games. I've actually started counter translocating more than translocating half the time, because just removing a unit like Paladors or Raptors or anything just away from your opponent's hammers after striking is really, really powerful. And as usual, we're a really, really strong army. So having that +1 to chant is really massive right now. Estrella and Crondi. Estrella's still really good. It's our cheapest take-all character, and she's a wizard. I mean, you really can't ask more for 220 points. I was really surprised she didn't get a point up or two. I thought she was going to go 230, 240 just because of how much utility she brings. Crondi took some bit of a nerf. Crondi itself is still really, really good. His general list keeps shrinking and shrinking. So you start having this idea where you might have to move away from the Vanguard chamber and start exploring other chambers, only because he is so expensive, and he needs protection on top of that, either Praetors or a Vexillor. So Crony's list in general have been looking real thin, but overall he's still a really good powerhouse, and earlier I said with manifestations, he's really good at that. And his -1 save spell is just massive for Stormcast in general, since all our rend is really low. And lastly, Karazai. They did nerf Bodyguard, and I almost feel that might be because of Karazai. However, it's still a really good combo, especially if we're going to this more infantry meta with his tail, and reducing attacks by 2 is really strong. Like, Chosen can't even fight Karazai. They just touch him, and then they have 1 attack each, and even if they double fight, they still can't kill Karazai through his ward and then any healing you have. I still feel the Bodyguard change was fine. It doesn't really affect him too much, because usually when if you're charging something with Karazai, you're usually wiping it, so you're getting the Bodyguard bonus anyway on your opponent's turn who has to charge in. If you haven't played Karazai yet, I would strongly recommend it. He's really good. He also unlocks everything for your army. I think he's a little bit better than Krondi right now, due to the way Krondi plays and Karazai plays and the meta we're shifting into. But yeah, Karazai has been really good, and I think he'll continue to stay good.
Yeah, one quick note I want to add for the Lord Relictor being an A tier. The reason he's an A tier is because he brings prosecutors. Like, that's such a huge thing to bring right now. Heroes that can bring prosecutors and vigilors and judicators and any other screening unit like liberators. Those are just better than they were before. Prosecutors are such a huge part of our army. They're almost S tier. Like, prosecutors are so close to being S tier. I think what keeps them out of it is that they're just inherently not spammable. They're so fragile. If you start bringing more than one unit, you really start to feel it in terms of board presence. Your opponent can just, especially on a double, just wipe everything out. So prosecutors are very close to being S, and Lord Relictor combos great with them, in addition to just being a good piece, and brings them in his regiment. So Lord Relictor, that's why he gets the bump to A tier. B tier units are units that we consider sometimes just short of being an A. It might be like a B+ unit or an A- unit. Something like Reclusians, I think, falls into that category, where they're really close to being in that same tier as all those other A units. But Reclusians kind of require more commitment than something like Prosecutors, even though they're both Ruination Chamber, even though they can both take the Sentinels of the Bleak Citadels to get a 5-up ward. Reclusians really need that Lord Terminos, and he's 150 points, and he needs the Quicksilver Draft, so you're dedicating more points, more slots and regiments, and an artifact in order to make this unit work. Now, they are good. I just did a video about the Quicksilver Draft combo, and I think Reclusians do really well in that scenario, so I think they're like a B+ kind of unit. Questra Soulsworn are just all-around efficient. You can stick them on a flank. They are 220 points of good damage output and good health, and they can test one objective on the side of the table really well. And when you need them to, they teleport somewhere else and do it over there. And sometimes they'll even get a 5-up ward while they're doing it. So all-around efficient unit. Liberators are now our cheap value screening option. Like, when you want to run Vigilors but you don't have 130 points, you just bring in Liberators instead. Their damage against 2+ saves is significant. It's not good, right? Like, you're not gonna kill a unit of Vanguard or anything, but it's better than, paying more points for something like Vanquishers, or God forbid you bring Vindictors at the same cost. Concussors are kind of in the same pool as Reclusians. They fall into that Quicksilver Draft combo, whereas Reclusians are tougher because they get a 5-up ward and they can shrug things like Covering Fire. Concussors do a lot of damage. They wound on 2s naturally. They are much faster. They have a shooting attack. They disable commands. They are just a solid unit, but they're way more fragile. Like, if they get hit and they don't have the Quicksilver Draft combo up, or they take a lot of shooting damage, they will start to take losses very quickly. And I think that keeps them out of the A tier. It's just their lower health pool. They can't keep up with something like Vanguard Paladors. For support, we put the Knight Relictor and the Lord Arcanum on Gryph-Charger, as well as the Knight Zephyros, Lord Terminos, Lord Celestin on Dracoth, Lord Celestin on Stardrake, and Celestin Prime in the B tier. Celestin Prime is here because he is a hammer unit that brings anything. So unlike a support unit like Estrella, Celestin Prime is there to do damage. He is obviously much more expensive than Estrella, but he feels like you're spending good points. Like, your opponent will actually have to consider Celestin Prime as a threat, whereas they'll probably just ignore Estrella. She's not going to accomplish much. Celestion Dracoth is just there because concussors are there. They live and die together. These two units will always be in the same tier together as long as they work the way they do. The other ones worth mentioning are the Knight Relictor. The Knight Relictor could be seen as an A-tier unit. I think what's holding him back right now, he feels like a third-string hero behind the Knight Arcanum and the Lord Relictor. The Lord Relictor, of course, brings Prosecutors, which is really nice for list building reasons, and the Knight Arcanum is just so useful, being able to countercast manifestations at +1. Well, at +0 overall, because you're -1/+1. And the Knight Relictor's thing is just way more specific than both of those. But he is going to be very good. I think the meta we're going into is going to be all about big health pools, slapping 5-up wards on big health pools, and I think the Knight Relictor is going to fit very well into that because he can reduce enemy wards by 1. And the Lord Arcanum on Griff Charger is here because he combos with Dracolines. I think he is the preferred choice when you run Dracolines. The resurrection effect you get is very strong, very potent. His teleport is awesome. Being able to translocate him forward, he can try to cast something like the Shackles, and then he can just teleport back freely. It's a really fun combo. He's great for tactics. He also brings Castigators now. I think that's kind of the big change for him, is that he did all that stuff before, but now Castigators are worth using, so you can actually fill up a regiment with something besides Dracolines. It makes the whole package way better.
I would say, like, the one unit that I'm excited about that is in C tier is the Knight Judicator. That's mainly because, well, up until summer, I think we will be experimenting a lot with Judicators and Castigators, but once that goes away, our shooting hammers essentially go down to Prosecutors, Vanguard Raptors, and the Knight Judicator. And it's a very interesting spot because the Knight Judicator and a single unit of Raptors cost about the same as, well, exactly the same as what a reinforced unit of Vanguard Raptors used to cost, which is 340 points. And their max damage ceiling is roughly the same. A reinforced block of Vanguard Raptors had 26 max damage, and a Knight Judicator and a unit of Vanguard Raptors minimum has 23 max damage, with the Knight Judicator, getting potentially 2s and 2s and -3 rend. Just something to think about for when we approach this summer.
I'd like to also point out Stormcoven in the C tier. I think we might have overhyped this unit a little bit. The more I play with practice, it wants cheap manifestations like Forbidden Power or Primal, so you're not getting the level 2 wizard doesn't matter for things like Morbid, which is kind of what you want. Strike First is a 7, but I feel like the biggest thing that probably hurts is like it can't take a place of power, which is really unfortunate. I feel like that unit gets significantly stronger if you could park it on a place of power and like string out towards an objective to maybe even get Wizard 2. But the not being able to access +1 at all on its spells does hurt it to a degree. They're not bad. I just, in practice, I haven't been blown away by them.
I think the two units I want to mention in C tier, and I want your guys' thoughts on this as well. First up is the Knight Draconis. Storm Drakes are good. I would even go as far to say very good right now. And the Knight Draconis, I can't seem to build a list where he feels good and impactful. Partly because Storm Drakes want to be prized beast, which means they need to be in the General's Regiment. You could try to build more regiments and hope your opponent has less, but if you really want to guarantee it, they have to be in the General's Regiment. And if you're bringing a Knight Draconis, he's probably the hero bringing the Storm Drake Guard, right? You're not going to do something like Estrella and then Knight Draconis. That's just a weird list. Too many points spent on non-hammers, let's say. And when you have the Knight Draconis as your general, well, the only units he can bring are extremists. So do you bring a list that has Storm Drake Guard and Fulminators? Nothing really feels right. And so you end up with a general's regiment that only has the Draconis and Drakes. That's 2 units. And then the rest of your list has to fit into another regiment. So it's really hard to play 2-drops with the Draconis. Very, very difficult. And I want your guys' thoughts on Annihilators, because Shield Annihilators are at that point where they're going to be spammable. 150 points for 2-up save, like 300 points for 18 health on a 2-up save. Imagine Storm Drake Guard, a 2 Storm Drake Guard, with a permanent all-out defense, and then they can defense on top of that. And that's pretty much what we're looking at. And if you charge them, there's a good chance you're going to strike last. They're getting so cheap that they're becoming a threat, a spammable threat. And we're probably going to be at least one crazy person in the next 6 months who's going to bring like 30 of them to a game, and it's just not going to be fun for an opponent playing a melee army. Do you think that's a viable way to win games, or is it just going to be an annoying thing that people have to deal with?
The Draconis thing I was thinking about, and I wonder if the pesters could get low enough where they're more viable to bring, like if they got something crazy like 150 ish for like 2 or something. Well, could you in theory make a double hammer list with, okay, I have my my Knight Draconis with my 4 Storm Guard and 4 Tempesters, and then just use a second hero to like fill out the rest of your list? Is how I see the Knight Draconis right now. But the problem is, I wish, like, I understand lore reasons why he can't bring Warrior Chamber or any other chamber, but I really wish he could bring at least Warrior Chamber, because that would make him so much more viable.
Yeah, the Knight Draconis is weird. I feel like his value is so tied into taking 4 Storm Drakes at the minimum. It's hard to like evaluate him outside of that. And he doesn't even have something that lets him fight with the Storm Drakes. It's just a hero that you take for spell ignore, which, Zinj and Seraphon are nice, but like I don't like. How concerned am I about that? Is my question. I guess I would say like he's worth it in a list where like you run the Knight Draconis, Storm Drake Guard, and your other heroes are just like a Lord Relictor or like a Knight Arcanum. He's fine. There's nothing wrong with taking him, but I don't think it's the most optimal choice if you want to bring Storm Drakes. I would much rather actually just bring the Lord Celestin on Star Drake, or something like Bastion or something.
I wouldn't mind if the Draconis went down another 20 points, but the problem, yeah, I agree with David. It's not the point cost, it's the regiment. If he could bring anything else besides extremist units, he wouldn't just be completely tied to bringing fragile cavalry, and that would probably give him more options in list building. So what do you guys think about Annihilators? We'll talk Shield Annihilators first. Shield Annihilators first.
Shield?
Yeah, I think they are getting to a spammable level. I am seeing like some meme builds in the Bastion AOR. I think that's, in my opinion, that's probably the best place for them to be if that's the like spam playstyle you're going to go for, because Bastion gives you the just outside of 3 or whatever. And that's like, that puts them in a place where they can be offensive or defensive. And it's hard to know because at the end of the day, they are 9 wounds on a 2-up save, and there are armies in the game that can very easily deal with that. Like, if you're trying to be close up with Shield Annihilators, like, Zinch will wreck you. Ogres will just kill you with charge mortals. They don't have to worry about it. And, like, Slaves of Darkness does not care. They have so much mortal wounds on 6s and anti-infantry. They can just absolutely wreck you with double fight. Like, they also, like, even if they get a strike last, Annihilators will not do enough damage into a chosen and rearguard list.
Okay,
But
hear me out.
especially like,
what if instead of 1 unit of Annihilators, it's 3 units of Annihilators clumped together in such a way that when your opponent charges, all of them get to fight before your opponent gets to activate. And with 3 units of 6 rolling on strike last, you have something like a 95% chance of applying strike last.
I think too much in one space of the board.
It is 900 points, but if it wins the game, then it's worth it, right?
I mean, it would just lose on some missions, right? Because Annihilators still have the same problems before, which is they are where you set them down. They're not going anywhere after that.
What about a Field Sergeant hero to help speed them along?
I mean, how much do dwarves care about 6-inch movement versus 4? I don't think we really care about that. I think Field Sergeant is really important for something like Bastion.
Yeah, with Bastion, like, +2 move moving in the deployment phase, and then +2 move moving in the movement phase. You can speed some units around. Yep.
Yeah, you can run too with Bastion because the only rule is he cannot be set up that turn, but you can run with him. So you're potentially moving. Bastion moves like 5, so 7 + 7 + d6, or let's say 6, so 14 + 6, 20, because you're saving CP on all-out attack. So 20 inches, and then deploying an Annihilator wholly within 6, 3 inches away. That's 20. Yeah, I mean that's good. That's gas.
Yeah. So okay, Grand Hammer Annihilators, I think, are the last unit I really want to talk about in this video. If you guys are curious about the rest of the units, I don't think they've changed significantly from our Battletome review. So if you're curious, if you're new to the channel, please go check out the Battletome review. We put a lot of work into it, and it's worth watching. There's timestamps for every single unit, so if you're curious about anything, you can go check it out. So let's close this off with Annihilators with Grand Hammers. We've taken them out of the D tier, so we no longer think they are not viable competitively. And my reason for doing that, I think, is because we're moving into a meta where damage will be extremely important. I think people are going to... This happens at the start of every edition. People run very greedy lists with low health pools, and eventually, over time, as more armies get released, especially if armies like Gits and Soulblight and things like that can bring tons of bodies onto a table, we start to see bigger and bigger health pools. Instead of bringing 100 health in a list, some people will bring 150 up to 180. I think there's some Fire Slayers lists that are going up to that level now, which is quite silly. And all of this will have a ward as well. So unless you have some anti-ward tech, it doesn't matter how much rend you have. If you're only doing 20 damage per turn max, it really doesn't matter how much rend you have. So I think this is where the Grand Hammers come into play, is if we move into this meta where we just need a lot more damage, more damage than what Long Strikes and Paladors can offer because they are very low max damage units. Grand Hammers come in as the, not the best, because Decimators are the best, but they're situational. But the non-situational best hammer unit in the book is Grand Hammers. If they get to hit something, they will do the most damage. And they're very good at it. Their problem is that they're slow. And it's really hard to put them where you want them to be. Now, there is a little bit of hope there, because you could use a Lord Celestant on foot with the Quicksilver draft and kind of drop them into play. And then if you fail to charge, well, at least you've got that, anti-charge tech. Your opponent charges you, well, they have to face reinforced annihilators, and yeah, not much is getting through that. So I think there's a chance for them to see play, and it's mostly because of meta shifts, and I think they can come in as it's still too expensive of a package, honestly. 420 for reinforced annihilators is insane. I can't believe they're that expensive. They're so fragile, they're so slow. I know their damage is good, but wow, are they expensive. That's where I'm at with them. What do you guys think?
It's a strange place, because here's the thing, right? Previously, when we talked about would we ever reinforce annihilators, the answer was no, because that's way too many points to be in one part of the board. You're almost certainly you're putting 36 attacks into 18 attacks and -2 rend 3 damage. Completely overkill for what you want to do, considering everything else they had in terms of charge mortals and drop down, and plus you would shoot something. I don't know if that's true anymore. The game army size has become a lot smaller. Obviously, there's exceptions, but in general, when you think about what most armies are, they have 2 to 3 utility units, a couple of heroes, maybe 3 heroes, and then 2 reinforced hammers. That's a very standard 4.0 army layout, and in that layout, I think reinforced annihilators do really well, because chaff in this game is no longer efficient enough to kill it. We're not in a meta where a bunch of stabbers, 20 stabbers can't necessarily take down 6 annihilators easily, whereas that was a thing before. They could do that. Death Rattle could take down 6 annihilators easily. They can't do that anymore. So matching our annihilators with Grand Hammers and a reinforced unit into their things and have it survive enough to where it can beat on everything else. I'm not saying it's the best strategy. Cavalry is easier to use, but I think it's viable. I think you can make it work with a little bit of luck, obviously.
Special shout out for Lord Imperatant, one of the only units that's ever gone down from D tier to F tier. He is so bad that he could be 100 points and still not see play right now. He's just truly awful. So special shout out to him. And that'll do it for this video. Thank you everybody for watching. If you think we missed something, feel free to drop a comment down below. This video took a little bit longer than I wanted it to, because the Battlescroll dropped at the beginning of December and it's now almost LVO. But you'll have to cut us some slack with the holidays and everything. Delayed. If you want to talk about AOS, feel free to join the Stormkeep Discord server. We talk about Age of Sigmar all day, every day. We post our models, we talk about games we've played, we build lists for all armies, we have community contests. We just have a great time on there. It's really the best Age of Sigmar community. And consider supporting us by becoming a member on YouTube or joining us on patreon.com/thestormkeep. For $5 a month, you can get early access to all our videos and also PDFs of all the slides that we use in our videos. So that'll do it for us. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.
See y'all.
Hey, guys.